Good morning, everyone. It's now 11:30 and this hearing session is open. This hearing session is into the examination of the Winchester District Local Plan 2020 to 2040. My name's Roisin Barrett. I'm a Chartered Town Planner. I've been appointed by the Secretary of State to carry out an independent examination of that plan. Just looking at the participants, I don't think we have anyone new here. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mum.
Yeah, okay, so I don't have to go through too much. We may have some listening to the recording, but for the purposes of today, I don't think I need to go through any more because you heard my opening in the previous session. So now I would like to deal with matter 18, that's the plan viability. Whether the plan is positively prepared and justified, effective and consistent with national policy in relation to viability. So I've obviously scrutinised the council's viability assessment of the plan. Sorry, I'm just pulling that up in front of me. So in terms of, we understand what its conclusions are. In terms of the methodology that you have used, could somebody set that out to me, please?
Mum, can I ask Helena to set that out, please?
Absolutely.
Fix and sell partnership. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you. Thanks. So in terms of the methodology, the study adopts a consistent approach with the National Planning Practice Guidance on Viability in plan making. Paragraph 1.9 onwards in particular of our July 2024 report describes the methodology. It's a well-established methodology which uses residual land valuation to explore the cost to value relationship. And this methodology has been consistent with all other studies that we've carried out at DSP, which has consistently been found sound and successfully passed through examination. So the methodology itself, I can go into the detail of what that is in terms of it's the sales revenue minus costs, which gives you a residual land valuation, which is then compared to benchmark land value. And we've applied that to a range of high-level development typologies, residential and commercial, and those have been developed alongside the council and are representative of emerging site supply. So principally the study is all about high-level development typologies.
Okay, now in terms of those typologies, can we just drill down to those? What typologies have you looked at? Because you've also got the greenfield and brownfield PDL.
Yeah, that's right. So in terms of scheme size, we've appraised a range from 1 to 500, and that's both PDL and greenfield sites. These are set out in Appendix 1 again to the July 2024 report, and they're a mixture of houses, flats, and mixed. So principally, there's a wide range of mixed schemes, again appropriate for the purpose of this strategic level study. So yes, that's how they were developed. Again, representative of emerging site supply.
And indeed, plan goes into some detail on those. The assessment goes into some detail on those typologies, doesn't it?
Yes.
And I've read that. Okay. Okay, continued.
Okay, sure.
Sorry.
So in terms of the other assumptions that fed into the study, again, those have been developed in accordance with the PPG and are also set out in our report and Appendix 1 to our study. Those assumptions have been informed by appropriate available evidence, and that includes extensive research and analysis by us and the council during the course of the iterative testing process that we undertook. We also, sort of in support of that as well, we also sought views from the development industry across 3 phases of engagement and consultation, and the responses through that engagement and consultation we had regard to in developing those final sort of sets of assumptions that fed into the testing.
So at what stage was that industry consultation carried out?
So the entire viability evidence base took place between 2021 and 2024. And the 3 different engagement phases, I don't have the exact dates off the top of my head, but I can find those out for you. But they took place during that.
At what stage?
So early on in the process, so as part of the initial research phases, as we were working with the council as part of the Regulation 18 stage of the plan. And then as our work developed and continued over time, we also conducted further engagement as that ran through towards the Regulation 19 stage. So it all sort of fed into the early phases of setting assumptions, and then as those assumptions evolved over time.
Okay. Could I just ask you, there are actually it might, sorry, I'm jumping in there. It might be appropriate for you to set out in broad terms the findings of the study in relation to Greenfield, PDL, and then in relation to the different typology, mixed housing and flats.
Yeah, sure. So our findings, again, it was a very collaborative process with the council. So we looked at genuinely seeking to inform and shape policy as it evolved. So overall, in terms of our final conclusions, we concluded that the plan policies were viable, and that 40% affordable housing on Greenfield and 30% affordable housing on PDL. However, where schemes would come forward within the Itchen catchment area, coming with additional costs to mitigate for phosphates in particular, the results indicated that an adjustment needed to be made to affordable housing, so reduced down to 35% on Greenfield and 25% on PDL.
That's right. Now, sorry, I want to home in on 3 things. One is affordable housing, the other is carbon neutrality, and the other is the BNG. So in particular, your approach to affordable housing, could you just indicate, now you've given me what the high level results were, could you just drill down on the evidence that indicates you've got 40% affordable housing, sometimes it's 30%, and then it's on PTL, and then it's reduced again where a nutrient mitigation is required. Okay, so what made you come to those conclusions, please, about the way in which that's framed?
Okay, so
Thank you.
Appendix 2 of our report
Yep.
sets out the detailed results tables, which I can bring up and share if you need. And when considering viability, we have to take a step back and view that wide range of results overall to consider the tone, the general tone of those results across all of the typologies. So, having regard to is it mixed housing schemes, is it on PDL, is it on Greenfield? So that's how we reviewed it. So we stood back, we took account of all of those results in comparison with relevant benchmark land values, and concluded overall that what our findings were. Would you like me to bring up some results and
I've
go
got that.
specifically into those?
So Appendix 2, now I'm looking at that. That's the beauty of working virtually. I'm looking at that document now. What are you specifically referring me to? I'm in Appendix 2.
So I'm just bringing it up now. Hold on. Sorry, can you bear with me a minute? Sorry, I'm struggling to open the right document. Sorry, apologies for that.
Don't worry. I wouldn't. I just want. Oh, okay. I just want to understand. I've been through this document. I just want to understand if you could bring together what the evidence.
Yeah. So if you look at table 2N of Appendix 2, which is the 100 mixed Greenfield results.
Yeah.
And you can see that the results are broken down into the different catchment areas. So, for example, within the Itchen catchment area, which would be subject to the 35% affordable housing that we concluded, you can see within the appropriate values range, which again is links back to our report. So within Winchester, it's between £4,500 a square metre to £5,250 a square metre. You can see that within both the two index seal rates, the residual land value result per hectare exceeds the benchmark land value of £500,000 a hectare. So you can see there's that bright green shading, which is indicating positive viability prospects. So from that, we looked at that and considered the 35% affordable housing was the right proportion to apply. Then as you look down to 40% affordable housing, just taking the same equivalent result, you can see that the tone of the results deteriorate and become much more marginal. So, for example, at £4,500 per square metre sales value, you can see in Seal Zone 2, the residual land value is £581,000 a hectare. And although that is theoretically still above the benchmark land value, it's becoming slightly more marginal. So in stepping back, we look at that and think, well, 40% isn't the right call in that location, and therefore 35% we consider to be appropriate.
Okay.
And we took that same process throughout.
Okay, and then in terms of the catchment area, the East Hampshire catchment area, same approach.
Same approach, same sort of theory in reviewing the tone of the results. Obviously, the East Hampshire, there is there's no phosphates mitigation, so there's less cost going into the appraisal. That's why the results are more positive and are capable of supporting the increased affordable housing policy.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very helpful. And then can we turn to CN3? That's about, in actual fact, we spoke about that. This is about carbon reduction. We spoke about it a lot yesterday. And we had an issue that arose about the assumptions that were underpinning the approach. Now, you will have seen that and you will have spoken to the council and you will have read the evidence. But the nub of what was being said is that some of the industry were questioning the assumptions on the costs that were included, and they were referring to an HBF document, Returning to Zero, that indicates higher costs. Could you give me your view on that and what underpins the costs that you include, the assumptions that you included? And please refer me to another document if you need to.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, sorry if this repeats somewhat, but the nature of a strategic level viability assessment such as this is that it's based on testing a range of development typologies, which comes with a mix of housing types. So not just focusing in on just houses or just flats, and on that basis, when we reviewed the council's evidence, which was provided by Etude, Elementa and Curry and Brown, their evidence, which developed over from 2022 to 2023, had costs of between 4.8 to 6.9%.
That's right, yeah.
And as set out in paragraph 7.6 of the 2023 net zero report by Etude and Curry and Brown, it states that costs for other property types vary with lower costs for flatted development. So from our perspective, that report, the data of cost uplift in that report was solely on semi-detached and detached houses, whereas our assessment considers this typology basis, which could be a mix of housing. Therefore, we considered it would not be appropriate for us to assume the upper level of the range that Etude and Curry and Brown came up with, which was 6.9%, because that was solely detached houses. So in our opinion, it wouldn't have been appropriate to make that assumption. We're looking at a range of property types, a range of development typologies, and we decided to make a decision that on that basis, 5% was a reasonable assumption to make. It's also an assumption that we have seen elsewhere. There's a number of other points I'd like to make, but I don't want to keep talking. If you have other questions, shall I carry on?
Go on.
Okay.
Yes.
And the net zero evidence also commented that the level of uplift will also vary in practice by not only development type, as I've just mentioned, but also subject to individual development specification, the developer in question, etc. Sorry, just reading my notes here. Even if we were to assume the 6.9% upper cost uplift, which, as I said, we didn't consider was appropriate for the context of our assessment, that's a difference of 1.9% between our 5% assumption and the 6.9% assumption. Now, a difference of 1.9% is not going to be the cause of an otherwise viable scheme becoming unviable. And when you look at the results as we have just now, there is sufficient tolerance within those results. So we haven't taken our testing and findings to the margins of viability. There is tolerance in the results for additional costs. Another point I'd like to make before I come on to the Future Homes Hub report is that the council's policy does include, in our view, sufficient flexibility where there are exceptional circumstances where those energy and standards can't be met. So I think that's...
And we went through that yesterday. Yeah. Take that point.
So in turn, coming to the Future Homes Hub report, obviously that's one source of information on this versus the Winchester evidence, which is Winchester specific, versus a sort of national report produced by the development industry principally. And I think Clara yesterday from Etude went into some detail as to the technical differences as to why it's not necessarily directly comparable to Winchester's policy. And I'm not an expert in energy, so I can't speak to the technical detail. But I think from those comments, it certainly seems to me as though it's not directly comparable. So the report goes into different contender specifications, and none of them align exactly with Winchester's policy. There's also comments within that report about the stakeholders that were involved in it disagreeing, and those costs of disagreement were ranging from 3 to 17,000 per home. So there's quite a variation there. Some of the costs quoted in the report were disputed by some of the stakeholders involved. Page 31 of that report in particular states that the methodology and results are disputed by some. And that study also didn't take into account that estimating costs at scale wasn't attempted. And we know from our wider experience that when you build at scale, there comes with cost efficiencies. And one other point, the report also concludes that no learning curves were applied to reflect this mass rollout, and as standards increase through building regulations as well. Another point to make, if I may, from which was stated within the council's evidence, was that there is now a consensus between specialists that these costs to meet net zero, and in particular the policy, Winchester's policy, are expected to reduce over time. And also linked to that, and I thought.
Sorry, what did you? Sorry, what did you just say? That there's consensus between specialists in the industry.
Yeah.
What are you referring to there?
So within the council's 2023 net zero report by Attitude, there's a reference that there is now consensus between specialists, as in energy specialists in the industry, that the cost of building to net zero is only going to reduce over time. It's not going to get more expensive as, you know, supply chains and developers get accustomed and used to building to those standards. It's going to become more efficient, and therefore it's going to be less cost. In addition, there's also very recently, and it's a piece of evidence by Essex County Council, so not Winchester specific, but there is now sort of emerging evidence that there's a premium attached to net zero homes, which makes logical sense if your bills are cheaper. So I can reference that specifically if you need to. But yeah, there's also a further point that, you know, if there's an uplift or premium on sales values, then that's going to sort of support additional costs that may, you know, that comes with building to such a you know, a net zero standard. Okay,
I understand.
Mom, if I could just add one point from the City Council perspective.
Please.
I think personally, obviously I probably would say this, but the relationship we've had with Dixon Cell has been really cooperative and inclusive. And having Curry Brown as well on the Attitude side of things, we've had this challenge kind of going on, and Helen has been part of that discussion. So we've had two very competent viability consultants basically checking and challenging each other's work. And that has been very fruitful, hasn't it, Helena, in terms of basically not only gaining your knowledge and understanding of obviously the costs, but also basically making sure that they are an accurate reflection of costs, and we are where we are in terms of basically the evidence base. But Helena, I don't know whether you want to say anything on that point.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, very, very early stages of the project, we pressure tested a range of different policy approaches for climate change response, and we worked very collaboratively with the council and Attitude and Curry and Brown in sort of testing different cost positions linked to the different policy options. And between all of us, we sort of concluded that overall the viability evidence and scope of the results supports such an important policy position that's a priority for the council.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say on CN3? My query about assumptions made. Okay. Can we move on to nutrient neutrality? Please, and the results in relation to that, and indeed the same. I heard evidence that the assumptions that were made in relation to that policy were depressed. Can you go through the same process in relation to nutrient neutrality, please?
Yeah, so the nutrient neutrality costs that we assumed, as set out in our report in Appendix 1, excuse me, sorry, they were based on information provided by the council. So I think the council might be able to expand on the basis for those figures. But they were within the Itchen catchment area, £11,250 per dwelling. Sorry, phone's going. And that was for nitrates and phosphates. And then the East Hampshire catchment area, which was affected by nitrates only, was £5,365 per dwelling. And those figures were factored into all of our testing. And as you can see, as I just we talked through on the results, our results are split by those different catchment areas.
Yeah.
So you can view the change of tone of the viability results when you switch between the Itchen catchment and the East Hampshire catchment. So we had regard to that when we were, reviewing the results and considering what our findings were for the assessment.
Okay, could I turn to the council, please? With the you fed into those assumptions, the assumptions that were made on those costs. Could I hear from the council on that, please?
Thank you, Ma'am. Yes, I can expand on those points. So the council are part of the Partnership South Hampshire, and they've got a specific team that deal with nutrient mitigation schemes, third party and council owned. So the costs that were assumed for the viability assessment were taken from an average in terms of the range of schemes coming forward for nutrient, nitrogen and both phosphorus. An example of this is the Eastleigh Borough Council owned mitigation scheme, which basically provides phosphorus mitigation and nitrogen for the Chickenhall wastewater treatment works. So it was basically an average of the range of the schemes that were available across both catchments in terms of the costs per kilogram of either total nitrogen or total phosphorus.
I think, sorry, I'll just say,
please, Mr. Fox. Please continue. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. I just say, obviously, Push have got extensive experience. We as a city council have got extensive experience now. Obviously, we've been living and breathing phosphorus and nutrients for some years now. So in terms of the robustness of the figures, I think we're in a very good place in terms of what those costs are and how deliverable they are. Because, like I say, our close working relationship with Push and obviously our landowners, we've got a very clear understanding of what those costs are and how obviously to do it. And obviously, you'll be aware that we're bringing forward our own mitigation strategy in terms of obviously our upgrades to our wastewater treatment plants. So the City Council has actually got a very good knowledge in-house of that. And we'll mention that obviously that work that we did with Push and our wastewater treatment work has been put forward to an RTPI award. And it wouldn't be put forward an award if it wasn't basically robustly prepared.
Okay, thank you for that. And in terms of the findings of the approach to nutrient neutrality in the report, again, you've got the two catchments.
Got the two catchments.
Yeah.
So
The Itchen and the
the
sorry, I
Itchen
don't.
and everywhere else essentially. Yes. So I think as I mentioned, when reviewing our results, it showed to us that the affordable housing proportion needed to be reduced to reflect the enhanced cost element involved in the Itchen catchment area. So our testing showed that should be reduced from the 40% to the 35% on Greenfield and 25% on PDL. But conversely, the East Hampshire catchment, so everywhere else, the results indicated that there was sufficient viability to confidently support 40% affordable housing on Greenfield sites and 30% affordable housing on PDL sites.
Yes. Okay. In terms, is there anything else that you wish to bring to my attention on your viability assessment and the evidence that you put forward?
No, I don't think there is. I'm happy to talk about any, if there are any other assumptions or any other clarifications you need, but I don't think there's anything else I need to draw to your attention other than the evidence base as that's set out before you. So no, I don't believe so. I did just spot one thing, just coming back to climate quickly. I mentioned that there was consensus between specialist consultants.
Yes.
I've got the reference paragraph for that within the Council's Net Zero report, which is paragraph 7.12 to 7.13 of their 2023 Net Zero Targets report. And that's where it states that energy standards will reduce over time as experience of the requirements, materials, products, technologies, and knowledge of a widening market becomes more widespread.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else that anybody wishes to add?
I think the only minor point from me, Mum, is obviously that the City Council takes obviously the deliverability of affordable housing very seriously. And as part of this process, again, we made sure that we put Helena through the ropes in terms of basically testing the assumptions, because politically, obviously, going for a different staged, obviously, approach to affordable housing is obviously very much on the political agenda. So again, we had another check and challenge in there because obviously we wanted to make sure we can deliver obviously what we want to deliver, but ultimately it's got to be viable. And we come back to the old scenario, it's a cake, and there's only so many slices out of the cake before basically something comes unviable. So, but having Helena's team from the very kind of beginning of the work has been invaluable in terms of basically all the different stages of the local plan being tested, right from the SIP, etc., has been invaluable to do that work. Okay.
Thank you for that. Okay, I don't have any more questions on the viability assessment. Now, it's 3 minutes past 12. This hearing session is
before we